If you want to know how to make perfect focaccia every time, then you're in the right place. Hello everyone! Today it's snowing, and that's on top of the 20 inches of snow we already had last week. So this is the perfect day to make focaccia. It's so easy and delicious to make, but you do need to set aside some time to let the dough rise. So let's get started. First, let me give you a list of ingredients I use to make a perfect focaccia every time. For the dough, you'll need 6 ingredients: 4½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, 2 tablespoons sugar, 2 cups warm water around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 1/4 cup extra virgin olive oil, and 2½ teaspoons or 1 package of dry yeast. Focaccia is a flatbread that can be flavored with a variety of toppings. Here I top the focaccia with rosemary and garlic. This one I topped with jalapeno peppers, garlic, and some kosher salt. This one with everything but the bagel seeds and garlic. And this one I topped with rosemary and an everything mix of seeds. My family likes the focaccia with garlic and everything seeds, but the rosemary on top makes it look nicer. It's really up to you what you want to put on top. Sort of like pizza, I guess. Here you can see all my ingredients lined up. Now the first thing I always do when making any type of yeast dough is to proof the yeast, which is proving that the yeast is active and alive first. Obviously we don't want to mix up a batch of dough and then find out that the yeast was dead. To proof the yeast, I start with 2½ teaspoons of yeast in a small glass dish. Then I add 1 tablespoon of sugar from the 2 tablespoons of sugar the recipe calls for. Yeast likes sugar, so a tablespoon is just enough to give it something to snack on. And then I pour 1 cup of lukewarm water over the yeast and sugar. The recipe calls for 2 cups of warm water. 1 goes in now to proof the yeast. The other will go in when I mix up the dough. If you watch, you can see the yeast start to activate. It will start munching on the sugar, and then it will start to bubble up, which is the carbon dioxide being released. Here you can see the process taking place. This is also called blooming the yeast. It takes a couple of minutes, so be patient, but once you see the foam, you'll know the yeast is alive. If it's dead, don't move on to the next step until you replenish your supply of yeast. Once you know your yeast is good, then you can start to mix up the dough. I like to start with the dry ingredients first. Here I have 4½ cups of all-purpose flour. Next I add 1 tablespoon of sugar. Remember, the other tablespoon went into the yeast. And 1 tablespoon of kosher salt in either order. It doesn't seem to matter which you add first, the salt or the sugar. And then I mix up these dry ingredients so the sugar and salt are incorporated into the flour. Next, make a well in the middle to pour in the liquid ingredients. Pour in the remaining cup of lukewarm water, 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil, and then the proofed yeast mixture. This is the traditional way, mixing the dry ingredients first, then pouring in the liquid ingredients separately in the middle, and then mixing into the liquid the dry ingredients bit by bit until all the dry and wet ingredients are mixed together. I find that by doing it this way, the dough comes out nice and smooth, never lumpy. I start by stirring the mixture with a wooden spoon, and as the wet and dry ingredients come together, I usually ditch the spoon and get in there with my very clean and sanitized hands. As I knead the dough together, I rotate the bowl and fold the dough over itself again and again and again until the dough feels smooth and elastic. You can use a mixer with a dough hook to accomplish the same thing, but I enjoy the feel of the dough in my hands. It brings back fond memories of me baking with my grandmother when I was young. Once the dough feels nice and smooth, I put it onto a plate and then wash and dry my glass mixing bowl, which I'm going to use next for the dough to rise. You can use a second bowl, of course, and then wash your bowls later, but this is how I do it. I use the same bowl. I pour some EVOO, that is extra virgin olive oil, into my glass mixing bowl, about 2 to 3 tablespoons. I don't ever measure that. Then I put the dough back into the bowl on top of the oil and turn it over and over in the bowl until I feel that the dough is nicely coated with the oil. I also swish it around the bowl so that the bowl is coated with oil as well. The idea is to coat the entire dough ball with oil so it doesn't form a skin, and to coat the bowl as well so that as the dough is rising, it remains coated with the oil from the sides of the bowl. Next, I cover the bowl with some plastic wrap and leave it to rise in a warm place until it doubles in size, which takes around an hour. I have a second set of burners in my kitchen that is from the days when gas stoves used pilot lights. So with the pilot light always on, this is a great place to leave my dough to rise. You can also preheat your oven to its lowest setting for a couple of minutes, then turn it off, put the glass bowl in the warm oven. Just make sure the oven isn't too hot, only warm. Something between 80 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit is perfect. You can also make your microwave a comfortable place for the dough to rise. Do this by first heating up a glass of water in the microwave to steam it up, and then place the bowl of dough in there. Really, anywhere that is nice and warm will work. Here it is an hour later, and you can see the dough has just about doubled in size. I knead it again for a little bit by turning it round and round and folding it over itself. Then I leave it to rise again for another hour. You can skip this second rising step if you want, but I find the dough has many more air pockets inside when I let it rise a total of 3 times. So that's what I do. But if you're short on time, you can skip the second rising. But it can come out better if you take the time to let the dough rise one more time. Okay, it's an hour later, and now the dough has risen twice, so it is ready to go into its baking dish to rise for a final and third time. I have here a 9 by 13 inch Pyrex glass baking dish, and I make sure to coat it very well with some more extra virgin olive oil. Here's the dough that I left to rise twice, and as I poke at it, you can see lots of bubbles in the dough. That's good. It's going to give me a dough with lots of nice air pockets. Yum! It's ready to go into the baking dish, which is already oiled. Here you can see me working at stretching the dough out into a rectangular shape to fill the baking dish. It does take a little bit of work, and of course the dough gets flattened out in the process, but not to worry, it will rise and bubble up again. Once I have the dough shaped to fill the baking pan, I cover it up and let it rise one more time. Some people like to dimple the dough by sticking their fingers in it from top to bottom at this step, but I do that at the final stage when I poke garlic pieces into the dough, as you will soon see. This is my third time setting the dough aside to rise. There are many variations on how many times to let the dough rise. Some people let the dough rise overnight in the refrigerator, but this is the way that works best for me. Alrighty, the dough has risen a third time, and you can see some more bubbles forming in the dough. Now it's time for the toppings. First, I sprinkle some everything mix seasoning on top. Next, I have some garlic cloves that I cut into thick slices, and some fresh rosemary that has been soaking in, you guessed it, EVOO, extra virgin olive oil. I lay the garlic pieces as well as the rosemary on top, and then, this is important, I push the garlic pieces down into the dough. If you leave them on top, they will get brown and crispy, but if you push them down into the dough, they cook with the dough and stay moist in there. My family likes it better when the garlic cooks inside the dough than when I lay it on top, which I have done in the past. But this way comes out much tastier. So I push all the garlic down into the dough, and then I finish arranging the rosemary on top, and then I drizzle the remaining olive oil all over the top. You can see the olive oil pools into the dimples in the dough where I push down the garlic pieces. If you don't use garlic, then push your fingers down into the dough to dimple it. It's tradition. The dough goes into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for around 25 minutes or until it's golden brown, like you see here. Here's a view of the bottom of the focaccia once it's done. You can see it's nice and golden brown on the bottom, and you can see all those wonderful air pockets as well. Let's slice it open and take a look. I wish you could smell this. It smells so mouth-watering, and it has a crispy, crunchy crust and a light and fluffy dough. Perfect every time. This is not hard to make. You just have to be patient and let the dough rise. Great for a snowy day when you're not going anywhere. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Please try it yourself and let me know how it comes out. And thank you for watching. Bye!